because we're on the air right now, let's just use the phone. We're on the air now.
Live from Washington, D.C., it's Quintessential Listening, Poetry Online Radio. Now, here's your host, Dr. Michael Anthony Ingram.
Hello, Michael.
All right, hello. Hold on one second. Good evening, everyone, and thanks for tuning in. Tonight, my special guest is renowned poet Bill Nevins. Good evening, Bill, and welcome to the program.
Hello, Michael. Thank you very much for having me. I hope you can hear me okay.
I can hear you. We're going to make this happen. We're going to make it happen. How are you tonight?
I'm okay. Yeah, great.
All right. We're going to make it happen. Let's begin this journey together, okay?
Yep. You know.
Yes.
It's great to hear you, though.
Yes. All right. Well, let me ask this question, and we'll see if we can make this work. We're having some technical difficulties, good people, but we'll make this work. What is poetry, Bill? How do you define poetry?
How do I define poetry? Well, that's a good question. There we go. Yeah, well, it's the thing that holds us together, both as individuals, individual minds and souls and communities. I'd say the world turns in the gravitational force of poetry. It's almost like glue. Okay.
Wow.
It's the bond.
Let me say this. You sound great. I can hear you perfectly. So we're on our way.
Okay.
You say it's like a gravitational force. I like that.
Yeah. It tends to inform what holds humanity together in some ways. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Beautifully stated. You're the first person who's ever described it that way, so I really like your answer. Thank you very, very much. All right.
Well, I think something else. I also feel that it is, at root, it's song. Obviously, it started as song, and it might be an individual song to oneself or a collective song that we sing together down the years and down the centuries. And it can be sung in words. It could even be sung silently in movements and actions. For example, the walk that my friend Bill Du Bois did in the mountains of Nepal to write his book, The Trail to Kanjaroba, where he walked around many of the Mount Himalayas. I think of that as poetry, also as a prayer.
Wow. As you think about your work, what are some of the predominant themes?
Well, let's see. I write about war. I also write about peace, love, loss. There's often some ironic or satirical observations of our times, history. Sometimes I'd say it's the music that leads me to some possible sort of sense. So sometimes it's about the poetry itself.
Wow, beautiful. How does a poem begin for you? With an idea, a form, or an image? You mentioned music. How else does it begin for you?
That's a good one. I rarely try to write in set forms such as sonnets or haiku or villanelle. Though I've done that, but as an exercise, I suppose I write from ideas, which then develop as a result of the rhythm, the rhymes, and, as you say, the music of the poem's lines. I tend to use a form of probably dramatic monologue that comes out of such greats as Matthew Arnold and T.S. Eliot and Kel Robertson and James McMurtry.
All right.
James McMurtry, friend tells me the persona speaking is not always or precisely the author writing the poem. I reserve the right to have voices other than Bill Nevins speak in my poems.
Wow. Please share a poem.
Sure. Let's see. This poem is in memory of my dear friend who died at the beginning of the COVID epidemic. His name was Bob Warren, and he has some beautiful poems out there. But he liked to call himself Coot Vicious. So the poem is called Coot Vicious in Memory. He took that email handle just half in jest, half in dead seriousness. He was old enough to raise a righteous fist if he must. He was young enough to call out the phony, the unjust. Like John Brown, bearded and fierce, he held his Bible in one hand, dear brother, an avenging sword, good sister, in the other. He would not dance your minuet, nor force a sonnet or fol-de-rol-de-rol. A pantoum or villanelle seemed to him pretentious as hell. Yet his litanies, adopted or not, burn like curses, like prayers. You would not want to meet him in the Valencia County, New Mexico dark, yet he brought light anywhere in this wide world he went, deep into Detroit, Texas, Porque, Los Lunas, your open heart, and a laugh, and a warning fresh and stern. Here's the damn good news. Take the gospel seriously, you Christians, or face the wrath of conscience of a son of man risen in fury to confront you with a 357 Magnum or a taut line of poesy. Take his name in vain, Coot Vicious, at your peril. Forget him not, comrades. He walked the earth like ye and me. He watches. Have no fear. Bring the next fiery wave. Souls were born to save. That's a poem about my friend.
Oh, very nice. You know, I can already tell it's going to be a wild night, Bill. That was incredible. I really like that. I like that. What moves you to write a poem? What is the core impulse for you?
Good question. Often some event that's happened, although that event I might find it in memory, so it isn't always an immediate event. I sometimes will write poems that, respond to current crises or very upsetting things that are going on. And sometimes I just write poems because I'm in a mood, either a good one or an angry one, or perhaps a sad one. Sometimes I imitate other people too. So. All
right. Let's go back in time. What was an early experience where you learned that poetic language had power?
Oh, gosh. I was in grade school, and I went to a Catholic parochial grade school with the nuns, and I was reading some Lewis Carroll, their nonsense poems and things out of Alice in Wonderland. And so I wrote a rhyming poem that the nuns loved. They loved it so much that they urged me to, they gave me good grades, besides the fact that my grandfather was the commander of the police force, but they smiled upon me.
Right.
They liked my rhyming poem. And then they urged me to write religious poems, and that led me to try to write some religious poems. Some were very pious, and some were downright scary and terrifying. And I don't think I have those anymore. Thank God.
Mm-hmm. It's one of my questions to you was going to be later on. Has a poem ever frightened or humbled you? Yeah.
The question, do you mean one of my own poems or one of the poems?
One of your own poems, yes.
Because, Daddy by Sylvia Plath scares the hell out of me, as does much of T.S. Eliot. But out of my own poems, yeah, I've been scared by my own poems. I wrote a poem when I was probably about 16 years old about the dark night, and I thought it was supposed to be about Halloween, but it ended up being so scary that it frightened me to read it. Yeah.
Bill,
we went when about as dark as a 16-year-old could go, and that's pretty deep, pretty dark.
That's pretty deep. Yeah. All great writers have great writing influences. Who are some of yours? You may have mentioned some already, but what makes them great in your eyes? Your writing influences.
That's a real good question. Well, there are many. Anne-Marie McCurran, who just published The Poison Glen, Irish writer, is a huge influence for me right now. Tough-minded, anti-sentimental poetry of people like Jack Hirschman, the late poet laureate of San Francisco. In earlier years, John Donne, T.S. Eliot, James Wright, Kel Robertson is an outlaw poet who is a close friend. Songwriters like Bob Dylan, of course, and James McMurtry, Warren Zevon, and Rimbaud, Sylvia Plath, Adrian Rich. I keep going on with these names. Yeats was a huge influence. I read Yeats when I was quite young, and I read everything. Well, everything that was available then. I read the whole book, and that was a huge influence. As was Shakespeare. I lived, as a young person, I lived near a Shakespeare theater, so I was able to go and see the plays being acted. Bob Marley, prose writers like Hemingway and Robert Stone and John Hawkes, they're all kind of tough writers. And Allen Ginsberg and Gregory Corso were great influences on me, and I met Ginsberg. I exchanged some letters with Corso, but I never met him. But I got to see Ginsberg read quite a bit. So yeah, those are.
Oh wow! So if one of those individuals could have served as your poetry mentor, who would you have chosen? Now, there's a lot of names to choose from.
I have to choose. I think I'd have a hell of a time hanging out with Artur Rimbaud. He would be my poetry mentor, and we would run guns and probably pick up a few slaves. But he was a great writer, although he did write in English, and I don't write in French. So I would have to say I would choose William Butler Yeats out of the bunch, if I had to pick.
All
one.
right. And why is that? Why is that, sir?
He would teach me how to be both very serious and very silly, and almost sometimes at the same. Yep.
Poetry is often about emotions, some emotion that you want to vent. Do you think that someone can be called a poet if they don't feel strong emotions?
No, I don't think so. I'd have a hard time with that. Certainly there is intellectual poetry, and I have a background as a journalist, so I tend to be kind of fact-drawn. But if you don't put the feeling into it, what do you got? You got to be blues if you want to blues.
Wow, I like that. Well, please share another poem.
You want another poem? Okay, hang on.
Yes.
I got a lot of poems here, so I can throw them.
Yes.
I love you.
This is your night.
Apocalypse. This one's short. Apocalypse Tao, Tao. Apocalypse Tao, or Farolitos in the Solstice Dark. And it starts with a quote from James McMurtry. I'm washing down my blood pressure pills with a Red Bull. And here's the poem. Omni, what the hell, Crom? You don't say. Sounds like some monster robot came to ruin our holiday. hey, but it might be okay. Hush my mouth. If we just blockade Africa and all the world south, inject our quiescent northern populations, zoom soothing pantoums, smoke some mota, play more D&D, homies, maintain passive online meta nation, who shout republic with the newly free Barbadians, while the crowned war chiefs rattle rockets at the Ruskies and Chinks. But never fear. Just buy some more Bitcoin as the real economy sinks, as we keep the empire's lights shining bright. Oh, say, can you see? As our wise elders apply paternalistic calm and reason, not unlike dear Pope Frank in his wisdom, and trim our expectations this shaky Christmas season.
Wow.
That's my Christmas poem.
Wow. What I like about your work is that it's real. You don't pull any punches, and I like that. I like that a lot. With that in mind, they say, don't ask me who they is, but they say that to see the world with complete honesty, one should look to comedians, musicians, artists, and poets. What do you think emerges naturally from your body of work?
Oh, that's a good one. Well, I would think some comedy, you know, I mean, it may be somewhat dark, kind of in-your-face comedy, some satire, especially satire of poets and poetry. But
Okay.
I would say some serious message emerges from it. Yeah, and I do think that you know, my good friend Jimmy Santiago Baca coined the phrase "rage into the page." So I think that there is anger, if not rage, coming out of my poetry at times, and I think it's justified.
Share another poem.
Sure. This poem, it comes from an Irish. I come from an Irish background. It comes from an Irish Gaelic word, which means rise up. Okay, and so the title of the poem is "Aishiri." Okay, Aishiri, fall lightly to that blue light. This poem is not me. This flight may be fancy, but never worry if we fall. Don't fret. This text is not you either. We can fly free in this song, whomever we may be. This go round, forget your parachute. Trust your cape. It's like that eerie December concert when Miles Davis turned his back on us but held one delicious, aching note for what seemed all night long, and then he left the stage. Ite misa est. And we silently filed out into that bleak Massachusetts night. Michelangelo's Roman steps descend like a river without end. Yet, Rainier Rilke, from his deep diving heart, reminds us that everything serious is difficult. And yet, were it easy to find solitude together, as easy perhaps as sex can be, or were it as easy as it is to fall backwards into a rushing mountain stream, then we might tumble laughing past rapids, round fierce rocks, until we dream drift at last, no more asking why, out to that moon-tugged rolling sea, towards that azure, endless sky. There we go.
Wow.
It was based on the Dickinson. Why? Okay.
Your voice is very distinctive. Actually, it's quite melodious. Right? What is the relationship between your speaking voice and your written voice?
I think I read in a slower cadence than I normally speak. Someone else could tell me for sure, but I think that's the truth. I try my best to, enunciate and articulate the words rather than slur them. And if I were just speaking, I'd probably kind of run. Yeah.
Share another poem.
Probably it's lower than I usually do.
Okay.
Let's see. I've got a poem here. You were talking about. Well, I'll do this one. Querencia. And Querencia is kind of the feeling of home among the people of northern New Mexico, where I live.
Right.
Their feeling of goodness. So the poem is titled. The poem is titled Querencia, or the Pursuit of Happiness in Nuevo Mexico, 2021. And it starts with a little quote from Robbie Robertson. I work for the union because she's so good to me, and I'm bound to come out on top. That's where she said I should be. So the poem, Querencia. Once we all owned this land together with no barbed wire. A common land was free to fish, to hunt, to graze, to gather wood, riverbeds to the high Snow Ridge, and beyond to Los Angeles. Now we own little but our dreams, our skills, our pride, our faith, our families, our vergüenza. Don't you see? These latter days, enchanted, beguiled, or befuddled by history, we are still free to be rolling out steer hills so we might pay the blessed bills, cut some timber, build a house, string a fence for those who came here from good Lord knows where, to live, to breathe our clear air, to pursue their happiness. We will haul them pinon and fine oak well split to warm their winters. We do not begrudge them their pursuit, their answered prayer. We have precious little, but we give what we have to give. They give what they will. They brought the great movies here to shoot by day, by night, on the high points on the ridge above, their Klieg lights blaring on the ridge we all once owned. And now, Arico, a rich man, rents them that spot. Popular land. Hang on, I've lost my poem. And now a rich man rents them that spot, and it is not a bad thing. Yeah, here we go. I'm sorry, I lost my line there for a second.
That's all right. That's all right.
The ridge we all once owned, and now a rich man rents them that spot. But we who have our faith hold tight to it as we work in the movies, as we bring them as we continue to live, as we see that our children will continue to grow in this land that is ours, in this land where we are strong union folk working for good pay now on Solidaridad. And so we may rebuild our Querencia here in this land of Los Manitos Bravos, this land we all own, senseless, together, where our children may study law or sing our holy songs, pursuing their own delayed future dreams, pursuing their happiness. Don't you see, in this dear land that once was free? It's in New Mexico, Paul.
Wow. You know, I sense that you're very passionate about living in New Mexico and its people. How does that passion come out in your writing? How does it come out in your writing?
Well, you know, I've been here for about 26 years, and so it's inevitable I would connect here to the people. I don't speak Spanish very well. I understand it pretty well, but I do, understand the cultures, and so I try to bring it out. Sometimes I succeed, sometimes I fail. Would you like to hear a poem that I think succeeds on New Mexico?
Yes.
Okay. And forgive my Spanish pronunciation, okay?
Okay, no problem. I don't speak Spanish at all, so hey, it's perfect to me.
Okay.
All right.
The poem is titled Canción Gringo Grito o Gabacho Sueño de Burque, and that in English would be a gringo's greeting or a white person's dream of Albuquerque. And it's dedicated to Keith Sanchez and his rock and roll stoic frame band, Homies Till the Wheels Fall Off. And here goes the poem. The iguana who winks, the old man who thinks, peeling green chiles, stringing ristras of red, never talk to la hora. That's the cops. Say your prayers before bed. Celebrate San Patricio and Santana's guitar. Wend this road many years on. Whistling gypsy rover over the hill. No, there'll be no Spanish goodbye song. Caminamos a través de nosotros mismos, pero siempre on contándonos con nosotros mismos. Panza llena, corazón contenta, gracias a Dios y la buena cocinera. I remember those tears, those strolls by the rio, con setas mágicas, those laughs. Adios, muños. Those South Valley, Albuquerque sunsets, dark eyes, your grito so wild, waking to rooster crows, your smile and your question, scrambled or juicy vehicle? Always. This is me, amor, I reply. The ghetto birds buzzing, the cops overseeing your crops, bullets tapping down on tin roofs, rattle, tap, tap, of a New Year's Eve, the Cinco de Mayo, or a 4th of July. Panza llena, corazón contenta, gracias a Dios y la buena cocinera. Those lurking, pit bulls lunging, holy penitentes chanting, tequila shots waving, Good Friday pilgrims climbing Tolmay Hill, mad dog stares, black berets, smoky mota, flaunted bling, hidden guns, enchiladas, bad. Panza llena, corazón contenta, gracias a Dios y la buena cocinera. Playing hay bales, breathing soft through warrior sweats, and failing to learn how to make adobe brick. Funerals, limpias, the healing light, the curandera's poetry as mad as midnight, and candles lit for the newly dead, the ancient dead, the prayers that we said, as all prayers must be said. Consejero corazón contenta, gracias a Dios y la buena cocinera. Or bed, huh?
I like that. Do you view your work as being controversial?
Yeah, I was recently thrown out of the Mexico State Poetry Society.
I like you already.
I don't know why I ever joined, but you know. I got it.
You know, Bill, so much is happening in this world of ours. The good, bad, and indifferent of it all. What do you see as being the role of a poet in modern-day society?
Fully, you know, because not everyone is going to have the opportunity or the recklessness or perhaps courage to speak out. So I think the poets need to. I vastly admire the singers among us, and I also admire the young poets, the brave ones who get up at the poetry slams, even if they don't know how to write a song. But they say what's on their mind. And I don't like it if they pander. I don't want them telling me something just because they think I'm going to clap for them. No.
Right.
But so many of them bravely speak up and they say what's on their mind and they say it as best they can. Mm-hmm. So I think the poet needs to be the public voice. And it's not to say that there aren't a strong role for poets to be very private, to write about nature, to write about the quiet times. I don't do that very much, but my colleagues, Michelle Otero and many other wonderful poets here, they do that very well. And so, that's their territory. But yeah, I especially think the poets at this time need to be speaking up against, some of the things that are bothering us. Fascism on the rise, war, and of course the poverty and the destruction of the environment, which lead to those other horrors that I mentioned. Yeah.
All right. Let's turn for a moment to your books. I want to talk about your books, Awe and Heartbreak Ridge. Tell me about Awe.
Awe. Well, Awe is the more recent book. It came out about 2 years ago, and it is kind of a mix. There's even some what I would call poetic prose in it, but it's largely poetry. It does reflect some of my life in New Mexico. It also reflects a long visit that I paid into Mexico, where I spent a lot of time in the Yucatan Peninsula a few years ago. So that came into the thing. It also reflects some thoughts about war and history, and there's a long poem called Greasy Grass. It's very long, but it reflects my visits to the Wounded Knee battlefield, and also to the Greasy Grass battlefield, which some people would say was Custer's last stand. So, not native, and I, in those poems, I presume to speak from my own point of view about the events that took place in history as they impacted the indigenous people. But it isn't, kind of feeling sorry. It's feeling honor to them and honoring their bravery, standing up to invasion.
Wow,
and
very nice.
So it's also there's some love poems in it. I don't know if I'm very good at that, but the love poems reflect the awe of love. Okay.
If you had to convince a friend or colleague to read Awe, what would you tell them?
You should read this book because it's going to surprise you. And you're going to find a poem about a bunch of somebody wandering around in Ireland and being surprised by a cow and thinking it's a ghost. And then you're also going to read quiet poems like this one. I'm going to read one of the poems.
Okay, I like that.
Of the messengers. We hear only hush of wings, these angels who sweep around us. Never a word spoken, never a sword drawn. Though their voices be strong, their hearts be brave, knowing that we would not remember if they spoke. We would not remember one soft word, nor recall one fiery blow. And so we greet them only with heart beats, as is the way of our kind, as is the way of this unknowing mind.
Wow.
I went through war myself, not as in the U.S., but I was in war zones, and as a journalist mainly. And my own son was a soldier and was killed in the wars. So I have always had. I was a conscientious objector to the Vietnam War and to wars after that. So, I've always had a very mixed feeling about it. I honor the bravery of people like my son, and I respect their decision, but I wish there were no recruiting. I wish that no one would join the armies. Someone said that's the way we end the wars.
Well, what about Heartbreak Ridge? Tell me about Heartbreak Ridge.
Heartbreak Ridge. It's titled after the central, fairly long poem in the book, which is called Heartbreak Ridge. And that poem is based on my long and somewhat convoluted meditations about the contradictions between my own life and my son's life. It was written while he was alive, and he got to read it, which I was very happy. I think he was puzzled by it, but he smiled and laughed and said, "Wow, Dad." And in the Heartbreak Ridge title comes from the fact that, well, there is a movie that Clint Eastwood made about Heartbreak Ridge.
Clint Eastwood, right.
But the Heartbreak Ridge that my son experienced was when he contacted me. I think he phoned me from Afghanistan. He was a commando, special forces, and he phoned me from Afghanistan and said that the worst thing that happened to him had happened. One of his close friends had rolled off a mountain ridge in a vehicle and been killed. And he said he had seen, people killed in combat. This wasn't directly in combat, but it was in a combat zone. And he said it just really hurt. It really, really hurt. And he phoned me to tell me how much it hurt. So I titled the book Heartbreak Ridge and wrote the poem about that. The book it's the first book that I published, so it's rather autobiographical. It goes back poems into my teenage years and childhood, and I even have a poem about wandering around in New York City and meeting Allen Ginsberg and the Thugs and those guys, and then it comes to some poems that are more in the present time. That's Heartbreak Ridge. I was kind of collecting things and choosing which ones I would put into the book, and here they are. There's one funny.
What surprised you most about writing that particular book?
What was the purpose in writing it?
No, what surprised you most? What did you learn from writing that particular book?
What surprised me? Gosh, that's a good question. It surprised me that I had this collection of poems that, I'm not very orderly with my poetry, and, they were written on napkins and pieces of paper and thrown into boxes.
Correct.
And I got them organized. I had an editor help me put them together. But it surprised me that there was anger. There was also some joy. There's recollection. There were things that came out that I didn't even remember, and then when I read the poems back then, there were time capsules. It made me feel like there was a 20-year period where I hardly wrote any poetry at all, and it made me feel like, wow, I wish I did, but I didn't, So this book was published after that period. Yeah. Oh,
wow. Do you have a poem from that book?
Sure. Do you want a funny
that
one?
You can share? Yes. Either one. Whatever is on your heart. Whatever's on your heart tonight.
No prisoners. What can I say? We met in Santa Fe, where she's got everything she needs. She's an artist, and she knew John Berryman. Poets are worse than lawyers, she said. Worse than mosquitoes. They're like the big flying cucarachas down south. They get in your hair. Poets tell you stories about anarchist painters who won't take cash from the cruel corporate state, and so they live in boxes made of cardboard under bridges, without berets, without canvas stretchers, without grants, without patrons, without brushes. Poets, she said, are like the syrup on a pancake. They soak in until they wipe out all the taste of the pancake itself and fill it in with words, sweet, sticky words. Poets make everybody else taste what they taste. She sighed. I hate fucking poets. She hissed. The first thing we do after the revolution is to kill all the poets. I think that one got me thrown out of the Poetry Society. Yeah.
Wow. Bill, you are the man. You are the man. You are the man. You are the man. Now, tell me about committing poetry in the times of war. That's what I want to hear about. The Poetry Film of the Year.
The movie, of that year. It came out in 2007, but it was based. It was supposed to be a documentary. It is a documentary, and it was based on events of 2003, 2004. In brief, I was hired by a high school, a public high school, to teach and also to coach and organize a slam poetry team. The slam poetry team of young people and I brought in my friends. I brought in a lot of poets from New Mexico. So we had, I would consider, the best poetry team in the country. We would have won all the contests. But one of the poets, a wonderful young woman, wrote a poem in which she satirized the President of the United States, who was George W. Bush at that time. She satirized him and asked, if you can have two wars, you've got a war in Afghanistan and now you're going to have a war in Iraq, how come you can have two wars and we have homeless kids living on the streets of Albuquerque shaking cans saying, please, mister, give me something so I can get some food? And how come teachers aren't getting paid well when you've got two wars going on? And how come it's true that you have these stickers on your car that say, God bless America. And if you just took the B, you'd be telling the truth. God bless America. Well, when that kid read that poem over the closed-circuit television system in the high school, I was hauled into the principal's office. And I was suspended and then fired. And then the team was shut down, and the poor children who had been only speaking their minds were hauled in and subjected to something like the Spanish Inquisition. No one expects that, and It was terrible. Fortunately, a wonderful group of lawyers from the American Civil Liberties Union and the National Lawyers Guild Forward filed federal lawsuits against that school, and I and my lawyers ended up being given an awful lot of money, in $100,000 of dollars, pretty much in cash. And we were surprised that the school forgot to say there should be a gag order on this, so they didn't. So we held a press conference and said, we won. I didn't want to go back to teach there, so I didn't, but I taught other places, and I became a university professor eventually. But after that, a movie developed from it, which was originally going to be a fundraising movie to help with a lawsuit. However, the lawsuit settled, so the movie was made, and it includes, it's from 2004, 2005 time, but it includes some of the great poetry performances of that time in New Mexico and in New York and other parts of the country, because we went on a a freedom of speech tour across the country, which is called Poetic Justice. And Joy Harjo allowed me to use that name. She said that's okay. And, so the movie it's a long one. It's about 2 hours long. You can find it on Vimeo, or you can buy it through Amazon for a few dollars. And it's called Committing Poetry in Times of War. I think it's most valuable for the performances that are in there. Not it's a story of me, but it's not mostly about me. It's about the young poets, and some of those performances hold up extremely well and are very, very current. They're very relevant. I mean, the movie in a way looks like it was made yesterday because they're speaking up and very strongly. So that's what.
Do you have a poem from the film? Do you have a poem from the movie?
I've got a poem that's relevant to the movie. Can I do that?
Okay,
one?
I'd like to hear it. Yes.
I mean, yeah, here we go. It was written a little bit after the movie, but it's of the themes that are in the movie. It's called Kabul Sunset. Mourn your dead now, land of the free. Dedicated to Ian Fishback, a very brave soldier. Kabul Sunset. As proud-robed mujahideen give wary thanks in bearded faces to Allah, the ruins of forward operating bases, daubed in sad, skulled graffiti boasts of long-departed Yanks in shadows of rusting Russian tanks. I have heard or read wise, point words. They've sewn together my shifting, drifting worlds. Kipling, Shakespeare, John Prine, James Wright, Lennon, Dylan, whatever gets me tonight. Larry Kirwan's Fallujah song, or Patrick Sky diving into the wreck of the Iliad with sweet ocean long, or some coffee Irish bard, hoping not to shatter. I read old battle poems for weary solace, for my own true boy gone to war for so long. Starflecked American war guidance above each letterhead. Rest assured, sir, you are in our thoughts. Albuquerque sun rise for him, as I feared he now had no eyes. That awful morning long ago, I was a foolish dad, for he saw, I know. I went mad a month then, as I wrote frantic lines, silver bass and other cries, bitter sighs. I knew he was dead. We've gone years now to these coronavirus times, changed utterly, as old Yeats said. Do old poets ever heal as nations move on? In marigold sunset blaze of Sunday of the beloved dead, when all holy red banners had finally set, the dark came to wrap our mortal souls. Spanish prayers were said, and yes, at peace we are, he and I. These many years of peace dropping slow, these years of a war that should have ended long ago. Gracias. So there's
Bill?
that.
Wow.
Yeah?
Do you think you were meant to be a poet? Do you think you were meant to be a poet?
Yeah. I think so. Yeah. You know,
tell me why.
So I had to have a job, but yeah, I probably was meant to be a poet. Yeah. Because,
why?
You know, because I do that pretty well. You know, I'm not sure I do everything else really well, but but I also think it kind of is in the blood. You know, it comes down through the years and the centuries, and something attracted me to songs and music, and you know, it wasn't just the radio. You know, it was something that pushed me there. So perhaps that was whatever you might call it, fate or destiny or bad luck. But
all right. Well, a question for you. If you could tell your younger writing self anything, what would it be? You've been writing a while. What would you tell your younger writing self now that you know everything that you know about writing?
Probably tell them, well, you know, I tell them what anyone would tell their younger self. Don't worry, it's probably going to be all right. You know, don't get so anxious. As far as the writing end of it goes, I probably would encourage them to write more. You know, to say, you know, you're doing pretty good, but it's the way the way of the world to be distracted by other things and to, you know, get involved in, you know, family, raising children, falling in love, getting drunk, getting a job, getting fired, getting another job, all that stuff. And I would probably say to my inner self, stuff's going to happen, you know, but don't forget, you got to keep writing. Just you know,
got to keep writing.
Right. Also, I would say read. And I must say I did read a lot, but could have read more. I once sat here with a good friend, Hakeem Bellamy, a wonderful poet, and Linton Kwesi Johnson. You know, I got to introduce them to each other. And Linton just leaned over to Hakeem and he said, "Blood, how much you reading? You're not reading enough. Read more. You got to read everything." Yeah. So there's advice for me. Read even more.
Read even more. Wow.
Yeah.
Share a poem with us, please.
Sure. Cyberia. Cyberia. With a commissars of poetry. I dreamt I was Comrade Yevtushenko, dodging or losing KGB. I dreamed that I joined the State Poetry Society. Meetings every Tuesday with cold old pizza while they defined rhymes. I got this shit. They cut my wrists and they sucked real hard. And then they sent me a membership card. You're one of us now, lad. Blood in, out. We love you and your pantoums. Of that, there's no doubt. It was better than the Gulag, I guess. But then, Tavarici, it got much. I jumped there with Mayakovsky, and the Soviet versifiers guild caught me, made me pay dues to spit out true anti-imperialist ML poetry. So I composed a sonnet about Allen Ginsberg's shoe, Iligal Mescal, Glasnost, and Gorbachev's tattoo. Then the dream ended of a sudden, and I dozed off anew. Slept so well, friends, I woke up like Zhivago, wrapped in an ice blue haiku. Is that okay?
Oh, I like that. I like that. I like that a lot. I like that a lot. You know, writers and poets write for a myriad of reasons. Some write primarily to speak a message to their audience. Others write because to stay silent is not an option. Bill, why do you write?
Well, you just said why, because to stay silent is not an option, even though it might be you know, better sometimes to keep your mouth shut and just get along. But I feel like I write because, well, I like it, you know, and I have to, in a way, in order to get it out there. Otherwise, it'll rattle, the poems or whatever they are will rattle around in my head all the time. But I also feel that, you know, I write sometimes just to keep up with my peers. You know, I went a long time with not writing anything. And then when I needed to get up at poetry circles or other gatherings of poets, I couldn't just stand there and recite Chaucer. I needed to have something original.
Yes, I understand. I do understand. Here's a fun question for you.
We don't do it for the money, although I actually have gotten paid a couple of times, but normally we don't pay.
Well, here's a fun question. What would you choose as a writer as your mascot, avatar, or spirit animal?
Probably. Oh, that's a very, very good question. The coyotes are out here in New Mexico, and I just saw a small pack of them. I was walking my dogs a few minutes before this, and so I think I'd probably take the coyote because he's a trickster. He's wild. Okay. Blends into the background, but when he needs to let you know he's there, he really, really lets you know he's there. You know, he howls.
I mean, I can't imagine seeing a coyote, much less a pack of them. I mean, that's just not been my experience.
You know, wolves. I think, though, honestly, based on experience, if I had to take a spirit animal, it might have to be a female elk. Because
a female elk.
You know, people think of elk as beautiful animals that you see at a distance, but where I live in the mountains, I see them very close. They even walk up to the edge of the house, you know. And one time, 3 years ago, I was walking by the edge of the woods, and I wasn't paying any attention. I was actually making up a poem in my head. Suddenly, I looked up. My dog ran past me, ran back to the house out of the woods, and I saw a female elk charging me. And they very great. They have very long legs. It came to within, I would say, 3 feet of me, and I got behind a tree. I never looked into eyes that had such coldness and rage and no interest in no interest in negotiation. No friendship. What I think happened, and eventually, you know, I'm not dead, so eventually I got out of it.
Yes. Yes.
But the animal was undoubtedly, as a ranger, you know, forest ranger told me, undoubtedly protecting her newborn calf, who was probably buried in leaves near where I was standing. And so you can totally understand it. It's a fierceness and a need to do at even the risk of your own destruction, because she didn't know if I didn't have a gun, you know, that you will preserve what's right, preserve your family, preserve your child, and preserve life. And, you know, I sometimes feel the poet should be willing to risk almost anything to preserve the truth, preserve life. So, fortunately, a beautiful woman intervened and yelled very sternly in a high school teacher's voice at that animal and threw a stick, and the animal went away. So I'm here to talk to you. I didn't get to
Yes, you are. And I am so glad that you're here to tell me about it, that you live to tell the story. Wow. We have time for one more poem. Just one more. And you have a vast collection, so I'm sure it's going to be hard to choose one, but we have time for just one more.
Just one. Okay. I'll do this. It's from the next book I do will be called Afterburner. I don't know when it will come out, but it will sometime soon. And this poem is from that collection, and it is called Asuf. Okay. Asuf, or Nomad No More. And it is dedicated to Ibrahim, the great poet of the Tinariwan rock band from Mali, and to Fatuma. They are the Tuareg Tamashek poets. Anyway, Asuf, Nomad No More. The word asuf translates from Tamashek as tristesse, or maybe longing, but neither translation quite gets it. Maybe nostalgia comes close, but the blues hits the mark better. If those blues are played on steel with a real broken, bloodied bottleneck. On the morning after Junior Kimbrough's Mississippi juke joint burned down. Those blues were birthed in Africa, after all. Yet, you have to have loved the Sahara for 20 centuries, its deserts, oases, caravan routes, warriors, women, children, and music to truly feel Asuf. The indigo-draped nomads, they say it's everything that lies beyond the campfire, everything we know and that we cannot know. How little we knew then in our own wandering days when we too were nomad, of how now we would be nomad no more, roaming only in mind, in heart, our bodies static in a mortgaged land bought on faith as safekeeping for our dreams, a place where those dreams slowly frayed, dried, softly died. It's like when you try so hard to get home and the sun begins to, or it's like when you ride under stars in some cool desert night and the sun begins to rise, but your camel won't stop, so you nod off, forgetting fear, holding to the only song you still hold dear. Nakid Mahajakia Asuf Elalan. What can I do with this eternal longing? Allah Isa Mahadet Ul Erakan. What can cool a heart that burns? That song. Okay?
Wow. Bill, what piece of advice would you give to your readers? What advice would you give them when they pick up your book? What advice would you give them?
When they pick up my book, in order to understand it, just plug in anywhere. No need to go from the beginning forward, although I would hope eventually you will. But I would say just flip open to and read that. And also, I would advise them, read the poems out loud to you, even if you stay silent, but mouth them in your mind. Yeah, they're meant to be read out loud.
Wow. All right, I like that. Where can listeners find your work?
On Amazon.com. It's definitely there. Both books, Awe and Heartbreak Ridge on Amazon. You can also buy them in many bookstores. I prefer people buy them in bookstores. And failing that, if people send me a note, I'll be glad to send them a book. Well, I'll sell the book or trade it. They could email me.
Okay, email you where? That's my next question. How can listeners stay in touch? Email you where?
Email. Want me to read my email address? It is,
yes, that'd be nice.
Lowercase BILL _ NEVINS @yahoo.com. You could also reach me via Facebook, either my own Facebook page, which is Bill Nevins, that's the name, or the Vos Clara, VOCLARA, Vos Clara Poetry and Song Project, and you can also reach me there.
All right. Finally, what's next in the works for you? Where do you go from here?
Well,
creatively,
I just wrote a magazine story in New Mexico Kids magazine about youth poetry in New Mexico, and it's not a poem, it's a long story which also includes poetry by some of the youth. And in the course of that, I learned a lot about the wonderful youth that are coming up, the programs to encourage them, including the youth poet laureate program that Amanda Gorman was leader of, or a product of, and it's a good symbol of. So I'm encouraging that. Both in the nation and also here in our city of Albuquerque, I'm encouraging that to be developed here. I also am organizing poetry gatherings and readings via that Voz Clara group that I mentioned, that I founded, both online through Zoom and Facebook, and also through in person when COVID permits. I also read my poetry, and I hear of my colleagues on Cultivating Voices Live, the wonderful every Sunday afternoon online poetry program run by my good friend Sandy Allen. So I'll be doing that. I'm going to write more poetry. Keep going. I've begun to copyright, to register songs with ASCAP, writing songs. And some of my poems will become songs, and I'm collaborating with people who can play music better than I can. I'm not very good at it. but I
all right.
So there you go. And I'm hoping to keep living and breathing and having a nice holiday season, as I hope you.
Well, Bill, I think you're great.
Thank you.
And I am so glad that I've made your acquaintance.
Well,
you're a powerful poet, my friend.
We'd love to see you in person.
Yes, I'd love to visit New Mexico. It's one of the states I've yet to visit. I've always wanted to go to Albuquerque and Santa Fe. That's where I want to go.
You've got a place to stay and a bunch of friends here, so we'll hope to see you soon.
Well, there are coyote running around, so I don't know if I want to stay at your house. Packs of coyotes. Nothing personal. Nothing personal at all. But
don't worry about them. But we want to worry about the
okay. Well, to our listening audience, I'd like to say thank you for tuning in. Bill Nevins is the man of the hour. I want to thank him so much. I want to thank those who tune in so much. And as I share with everyone every week, let poetry ring throughout the land. Take care and be safe, and good night, everybody. All right. Adios.
You have just listened to the Quintessential Listening Poetry Online Radio Podcast with your host, Dr. Michael Anthony Ingram. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or Stitcher. And make sure to catch our next episode.